today what we're going to talk about is planning for the future of your loved one with special needs. And as I said to those of you, I think maybe you were all on the call, I do have a 23-year-old son with Down syndrome. His name is Derek. And you know, he's changed. I also have two daughters. He has an older sister and a younger sister. Derek's 23. My oldest, Jenna, is 27, and my youngest, Katie, is 19. She's a sophomore at Missouri State University. And Derek has changed, you know, a lot about our family, and certainly one of the things, one of the ways he changed me is about 12 years ago. I got into financial services, and I specifically got into financial services to help families who also had kiddos with special needs. I worked in the mortgage industry for 20 years before coming over to the firm that I'm with now. It's morphed a couple different times and has had a couple different names, but I've been generally in the same place for the last 12 years. And, you know, it's really about that. You know, I know most of us as parents of, I assume everybody's got a child with Down syndrome, parents of kiddos with Down syndrome, you know, you get to a point where you're like, okay, you know, this is my ride and I'm going to enjoy it, but what is going to happen to my son or daughter when I'm not here anymore? And so that's really the crux of it. Now, can I just have, and I can see a couple of you, do any of you have kids that are under 18? If you do, just raise your hand. Under 18? Okay. So I want to talk a little bit about that because there are some differences between children with Down syndrome and adults with Down syndrome. And I don't mean that from, you know, a growth perspective or an academics perspective or anything like that. I'm really talking about it more from a government assistance perspective. When children are under the age of 18, they're not an adult, right? So when the government looks at people with Down syndrome who are under 18, they consider mom and dad's assets and resources for purposes of qualifying for government benefits. So oftentimes families who have children under 18 aren't really receiving any benefits, any what we call needs, NEEDS, needs-based benefits from the government. Once your kiddo turns 18, he or she is an adult. And so at that point, he or she stands on their own 2 feet when it comes to income and assets. And that's oftentimes when families start looking at these different types of needs-based benefits. So this is not to say that you should not plan before your child is 18. Because there are things that you can do when your child is 2 or 5 or 7 or 12 that can mess things up when your child's 18. So the sooner you know about these sorts of things, the more prepared you're going to be at the age of 18. So I'm going to do my best to talk on both sides of that. What if your kid's over 18 and what if your kid's under 18, to kind of show you a little bit of the differences there. But, you know, unfortunately, you know, only, you know, the God above knows our last day on this earth, right? So we don't know if we're going to be around when our kids, you know, 18 or 20 or 52, right? So planning is important no matter your age and no matter the age of your child. So we're going to come back to this quiz a couple of different times, but these are kind of the 3 parts, if you will, of the discussion that we're going to have today. So have you, and I'm not typically a raise your hand person about a lot of things other than what's the age of your kiddos. But one of the questions is, have you left more than $2,000 to your dependent with special needs? Do you have a future care provider for your child? And have you listed your child as a beneficiary on any sort of financial documents? And we'll come back to all of these in the future. And this is where I'm supposed to ask you to raise your hand, which I'm not going to do. But the situation is that if you did say yes to any of those things, you might need to do some additional planning. So first of all, we're going to talk about some legal stuff. Okay. Now, One of the things that I have found in my 12 years of working with families from a financial services perspective is that a lot of people have a misconception about a will. So if you have a will, that's great. If you don't have a will, I'm here to tell you the state of Missouri has taken care of that for you. I assume you're all Missouri residents. If you're an Illinois resident, don't worry, the state of Illinois took care of it for you. I think it's probably doubtful that we have anybody here from any other states. And if that doesn't scare you enough that the state of Illinois or Missouri has taken care of your will, I'm not real sure what else would. But the reality of the situation is, if you die without a will and you are a married person and you have children under the age of 18, so minor children, the state says, and this is Missouri, okay, Illinois could be a little bit different, but in the state of Missouri, if you die without a will and you have children under 18, your spouse gets 50% of your assets, okay? Your children get the other 50%. So if you have if you have two kids, let's say you die and you have $100,000 in assets, your spouse gets $50,000 and your children get $25,000 each. And when I say it's your children's money, I mean it's your children's money. And your probably spouse, your spouse will have to go to court to become what's called the conservator of your child's estate, and they will have to report to the court on what they're doing with your child's money, even though it's their mom or dad. So one of the things that I always encourage families to walk away with is, if you have not created your own will, you should really, really do that. My kids are all older now, right? They're 19, 23, and 27. But when they were young, if something had happened to myself or my husband, I would not have wanted the surviving spouse to have to share the money with the kids. Now, I would certainly expect the surviving spouse to take care of the kids. But there's a very big difference between sharing the assets or taking care of your children and having the, money be their assets. The other thing that I'm going to tell you about a will that I think is often very misunderstood is that if you die and the only sort of legal document that you have in place to transfer your assets is a will, then your assets will go through probate. Now, what does that mean? Well, probate is the process of transferring assets from a deceased person to the eventual heirs of that property, whether it's a checking account, a savings account, a car, a house, an IRA, whatever it is, life insurance, whatever it is. If you die and you say, I've got this $100,000 bank account, I'm going to die, I've got a will, I'm going to leave it to my spouse, and it's only through the will, then that $100,000 account goes through probate, which is a court process. A, it takes time, right? Because it's going to go through the court. B, it takes money because the court's going to charge you fees, as well as the attorney who has to help you probate that asset. And C, it's public record. So anybody in your world who's just curious, and most of you probably know who Mrs. Kravitz is from the Brady Bunch, right? So if any of you have a Mrs. Kravitz living next door, Mrs. Kravitz can go to the county courthouse and find out everything you had when you died. Okay? I'm not telling you not to have a will. You should have a will. But just to understand how a will works. A will put your assets through probate. It will be expensive and time consuming, and it is public. Okay? So the next thing we're going to talk about is a trust. Now, we all here in kind of middle America, none of us probably are family members of, Bill Gates or the Rockefellers or the Carnegies or, any of the, maybe Kim Kardashian and Kanye West, right? We don't think we really need a trust. Like, I don't have an estate. Like, why do I need a trust? I don't have that much stuff, right? But the cool thing about a trust is that a trust can allow you to do really creative things with your assets when you pass. Just give me 1 second. Just had to tell my husband I already fed the dogs. I'm at home, by the way. The cool thing about a trust is that you can do some very creative things with the trust. Number one, a trust avoids probate. So everything I just told you about a will does not apply through a trust. So any assets that you leave to somebody you love when you pass away via a trust will go automatically to that person you've named. It does not go through probate, and it is not public. So if you have a nosy neighbor, or maybe you have a yours, mine, and ours situation where you have, mom and dad have come together, they've got his kids, her kids, and now our kids, none of that information needs to be out there in the public eye. Only whomever you've given access to the information will be able to see the information. The other cool thing about a trust, and I say this, it's kind of funny now because my oldest daughter is 27 and she's already graduated from Mizzou. But when she was young, she had aspirations of going to UCLA. Well, UCLA is probably pretty expensive. I've never really looked it up, but I'm sure it probably costs a little bit more than Mizzou, especially if you're a Missouri resident. And so my husband and I put in our trust that we would pay for the University of Missouri Columbia or its equivalent. So basically, Jenna, if you want to go to UCLA, assuming my husband and I had both passed away before she went to college, she could go to UCLA, but she was only going to get her 20 grand that was going to get her through Mizzou. She wasn't going to get her 40 or 50 or 60 grand that she needed to go to California. So a trust allows you to, like I said, be pretty creative in what you choose to do with your assets when you pass. And it allows you to make sure things are going to happen exactly how you'd like them to happen. Trust is really just, a container or a shoebox. You just look at it as it's just a box you're putting your assets in. And you've got an instruction manual within that box that says what's supposed to happen with everything that goes into it. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. So then we're going to talk about guardianships, conservatorships, and guardian ad litem. So when your child turns 18, as we discussed earlier, he or she becomes an adult. In the state of Missouri, he or she has certain rights and responsibilities, frankly, as an adult. And some of our kids may or may not be able to make those adult-like decisions when they're 18. And so we, as their parents, pretty much have to make a decision at that time as to whether or not we think we need to become our child's guardian. Now, what does that mean? Basically what that means is that as a guardian of a person over the age of 18, you assume their legal rights to make decisions. When your child's 5, you get to decide where your kid lives and where he goes to school and, whether or not he plays soccer or baseball or whatever, right? But when that child turns 18, he gets to make all those decisions for himself. And if you choose to become a guardian, then you basically choose to obtain his decision-making authority. Now, is that right or wrong? It depends on the person. Everybody's situation is different. I will tell you that personally, my husband and I decided not to become our son's guardian. So Derek is his own guardian. There are risks to that decision. Derek, for instance, decided when, I guess he was about 20 or 21, that he did not want to go to summer camp. We had sent him to summer camp for 6, 7, 8 years in a row. And he decided, you know, at 20 or 21 that he was an adult and adults don't go to camp. Although I want to go to summer camp. But he was an adult and he didn't want to go to summer camp. Some of you may or may not be aware, but St. Louis, I live in St. Louis County. St. Louis County has this great program through the Rec Council where they will give you a voucher and they will pay for a portion of your summer camp. And if you don't know about that, you need to ask me about it. I'll get you more info. It's a great program. Anyway, you have to apply for these funds in January or February. And Derek didn't think he wanted to go to camp. So he has to sign that form because I'm not his guardian, right? He's an adult. He's applying for the money. I did some crafty talking, like sometimes we do. We negotiate in creative ways, like making him ride the exercise bike so he can watch WWE. And eventually he did sign the voucher request and we did get the money and he did go to camp. But the point is that, you know, when you make a decision at the age of 18, and even if you choose not to become your child's guardian just because you think you're not making a decision, you are making a decision. The other thing that's concerning about not being Derek's guardian is that, you know, he's pretty smart. And if he, you know, ended up at, you know, Joe's Rent-A-Shack and decided to get a, you know, 60-inch TV to watch WWE on and agreed to a 23% rate of interest to pay back the loan, he's obligated because he's an adult. On the flip side of that, I don't know how Derek's going to get to Joe's Rent-A-Shack because he doesn't drive. So, you know, he doesn't really go anywhere with anybody that I don't trust. So we kind of have that in our back pocket. But keep in mind, at the age of 18, you need to make those decisions. Will I become my child's guardian or will I not? We actually had Derek sign powers of attorney rather than doing guardianship, which he named me as both his financial and medical power of attorney, which gives me the legal right to assist him in making decisions. But it didn't take his decision-making authority away. Everybody's situation is different. I'm not telling you that's what you should do. I'm just telling you that you need to know that there are options. The other thing I will let you know is that there is a really great piece at the UMKC Institute for Human Development. They've got a great program at UMKC. And if you look up, I think it just says Guardian Resources or something like that. If you look that up, they've got a great piece on, you know, just guardianship. What does it mean? What are alternatives? So that's something that you should look into. Now, if your kid's 7, I wouldn't really worry about that. But if your kid's, you know, 15, 16, it's something you need to start thinking about. Most attorneys recommend that you start the guardianship process right around 17 and a half, at least start having the discussions. They can't actually file for guardianship until your child is 18. So the guardianship is the decision maker of the person, right? Where do I work? Where do I live? What do I do for fun? Can I get married? Those kinds of things. A conservatorship is really the guardian of the money. And in the state of Missouri, a guardianship and a conservatorship are not the same. Now, that doesn't mean you couldn't be the guardian and the conservator. You could be, but it's a different process. And so one of the things that I always recommend to families is if you are seeking guardianship for your child, also request conservatorship. And oftentimes families say, well, my child has no assets. So why would I be his or her conservator? And I'll give you an example of why you might want to do that. I had a mom who I started working with when her child was over 18. He was a young man with autism and he was developmentally delayed, and she did become his guardian when he was 18. She did not become his conservator. We found out after I met her that grandma had purchased a life insurance policy for this young man when he was a baby. And within the language of that life insurance policy, it said, if you are purchasing this policy for a minor, when the minor turns 21, he or she will become the owner of this policy. And that is a problem. And the reason that that is a problem is because of that question we had a slide or two ago. Have you left more than $2,000 to your child with a special need? Those policies that grandma purchased had a value of about $5,500. This young man was already on what we call needs-based government benefits, or SSI and Medicaid. And so had he turned 21 with those two policies in his name, it would have kicked him out of his benefits. Because she wasn't his conservator, she couldn't do anything about it because it was money related. She had to go back to court to be assigned his conservator by the judge. Now, it was easy, right? Nobody was fighting her, but it cost her money. She had to get the attorney involved again. She had to spend the time to go back to the court. So what I always recommend to families is when you are going through the process of guardianship, ask to be the conservator. Say, I am not aware of any assets. I want to be appointed the conservator, however, so that if in the future my child comes into some assets in some way, I'm already halfway down the runway here, right? I've already been assigned the conservatorship. We can just reopen it and we'll take care of things. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. The last thing we're going to talk about on this screen, and most of the screens don't take this much time, but these legal considerations are just so huge in this whole process of what we're trying to accomplish here. So that's why I'm spending some time. The guardian ad litem is a person appointed by the attorney, or excuse me, by the court during the guardianship process to represent your child. So this is your child's attorney. Okay. There are times that people, try to gain guardianship on adults and the adults oppose it. And so that's why the adult who has, somebody is requesting guardianship of has to have their own counsel, their own representation. Okay. Okay. So see, I told you I get way ahead of myself. We already talked about the will and why you need to have one, and why I hope that's in big, bold letters on your notes you're taking. I got to have a will. What happens if you don't have one? I already told you Missouri's got that all worked out for you. Good for us, right? The executor of the will is the person that you name to appoint, or the person you appoint to take care of things when you're gone. Maybe it's your spouse, maybe it's a sibling, maybe it's a friend, maybe it's a child if you have an adult child. But you have the right to appoint that person if you create your own will. If you don't create your own will and the state of Missouri does it for you, they get to pick who's in charge too, which sometimes that scares people as well. The trust we've talked about, more private, can be a little bit more creative. You would typically be your own trustee when you're alive, but again, you would name a successor trustee, somebody to carry out your wishes after you've passed away. Okay. Okay, so why is this whole $2,000 thing important? Some of you probably already know this because you have a child who's over the age of 18. But for those of you that don't, for those needs-based government benefits, the two biggies are SSI and Medicaid. The federal law says that your child cannot have any more than $2,000 in assets, or they are too rich to qualify for this benefit. So if I have a kid with Down syndrome and he's going to be on needs-based government benefits, and he can't have more than $2,000, How do I take care of him when I'm gone? Right? The $64,000 question. So one possible solution to that is what we call a special needs trust. What I described to you earlier about a trust, it's just a regular trust, right? I actually have two trusts. I have the Baker Family Trust, and we also have the Derek A. Baker Special Needs Trust. The Baker Family Trust will get almost all of our assets when we pass away. So my husband and I have both have IRAs. We have each other named as primary beneficiaries, but we have the Baker Family Trust as the second beneficiary. Our 401ks, again, we're each other's primary, but the Baker Family Trust is the contingent. So if he and I are both gone, it goes to the trust. The house is in the trust. Our investment account is in the trust. Our cars are in the trust. Everything we have goes into that trust. Within that trust, it says, if Valerie and Eric are both deceased, 50% of this money is split between their daughters, Jenna and Katie, and 50% of the money goes into the Derek A. Baker Special Needs Trust. The reason that we have that separated in that manner, first of all, the 50, 25, 25, that's just our thing. That's not how you have to do it. Every family's different. You do what's best for your own family. But I told my girls, either I'm taking care of your brother financially when I'm gone and he gets more money, or that's going to fall on you. So I would rather leave more of my money to Derek, and assuming my daughters are going to make their own way, right? But the reason that we leave this money to Derek in a special needs trust is because this special needs trust has very specific language within it that makes it not a countable resource for purposes of SSI and Medicaid. So when SSI asks me now, because Derek's 23 years old, right? He receives SSI. When I'm asked, does Derek have any assets? The answer is he has a checking account. He also has an ABLE account, but I'll get there in a minute, okay? But from a countable resource perspective, all he has is a checking account. When my husband and I pass away, and though that Derek A. Baker Special Needs Trust is funded, and his sisters are asked, what assets does Derek Baker have? They're going to say he has a checking account. And it's pretty easy, not as easy as you would think, but pretty easy to keep his checking account where it needs to be. Okay. But if my, even if my husband and I passed away with $100,000 to our name, right? And he gets 50% of that, that's 50 grand. It's going to take a long time to spend 50 grand down to $2,000. So this is the way that we as parents of children with special needs can leave money for our kiddos and not interrupt the Social Security and the Medicaid that they're going to receive. Now, I will tell you, especially for you parents who have kids who are under 18 and are not receiving SSI, SSI is not going to make you rich. The maximum amount of SSI that you can receive is like $785. It barely I'm sure you're still below the poverty level in receiving only SSI. So why is it so important to keep SSI, right? And I'm going to tell you, it's not about the SSI, it's about the Medicaid, okay? In the state of Missouri, if you are approved for SSI, you are automatically approved for Medicaid. Now, I didn't say you automatically get Medicaid. I said you're automatically approved for Medicaid, and there's a difference. And let me tell you the difference. You still have to apply for Medicaid. Here's why Medicaid's important. Medicaid holds all the money for residential assistance for adults with disabilities, for recreational assistance, for transportation assistance, for job coaching, for, adult daycare programs. I mean, anything that you can think of when you're thinking my kid's now out of high school, out of any kind of vocational training that he or she may have done after high school, everything is driven by Medicaid. you've got to be eligible for Medicaid to do the things, to have the job coaches, to have the vocational training for your children who are now adults with disabilities. And just to be kind to us families, and I am being sarcastic here, in the state of Missouri, we don't get to have $2,000 to be eligible for Medicaid in Missouri. We can only have $1,000 to be eligible for Medicaid in Missouri. And actually it's under, so it's $999.99. So just to give you an idea for Derek right now, he was in a job coaching program. He's worked competitively. He's made money. And I reported it on a monthly basis. His SSI was reduced because of it. And I was fine with that. He was getting out of the house. He was working. He was making his own money. It was great. And then the restaurant shut down. And then he went back into a pre-employment training kind of program through the ARC. And then COVID hit. And then he was sitting on his bed. He was on some calls, and they were great calls. He did some calls with the DSA too, and they were great calls, but he was still sitting on his bed doing these phone calls. And I told you earlier, my son doesn't really like to move. So, we recently got involved with a program through Lafayette Industries and a competitive program with Pioneer Bakery, so that he's back out, getting out of the house again, doing some job training, and he's going to be working in a bakery. Because I moved him into this Pioneer job, I had to lose all the ARC stuff. But without Medicaid, we wouldn't have had any of it. So it's really vital that you get your kids on Medicaid when they turn 18 and that you maintain their Medicaid eligibility. And the only way that you can do this is to make sure they don't have more than $1,000 in their name. And that's why this special needs trust is so vital for our kids. Now, there are different ways to slice this pie. Not everybody is going to just walk out and create a trust for their kid today. And that's okay. You don't have to do it the way I did it. The reason we did it that way is because we have other people in our family who have also named Derek's trust in their own estate. So for instance, my brother has no children. He and his wife have no children. So when they pass away, and of course he has no kids, so he's the richest guy in the family, right? When he and his wife pass away, they've left their money to their nieces and nephews. Well, Derek can't have more than $1,000. So within my brother's estate documents, it names the Derek A. Baker Special Needs Trust. So it was important for us to get that trust to exist today versus waiting until my husband and I both passed away. Some families elect to do what I call, and I'm not an attorney, what I call a springing trust, meaning it springs forth from other estate documents that you've created. It might be a will. It might be just a family trust. I could have left it in the Baker Family Trust saying all our assets go in there, and 50% goes to the girls and 50% goes to the Derek A. Baker Special Needs Trust that you're going to create now. Okay. So we could have done it that way. So there's different ways to do it. There are also what we call pooled trust, P-O-O-L-E-D, pooled trusts. These are trusts that sometimes if your estate is maybe a little more modest, rather than putting your money in your own standalone trust for somebody to have to manage, you might do something with a pooled trust where you're actually kind of depositing your money into a trust that is operated by a not-for-profit. It would be tagged with your own child's name on it, but it's I can't work with the word coming to me is conglomerated, which is not the right word. It's put together with a bunch of other families' monies, basically, but it is still tagged to your particular child. It's not going to be as personal. You're not going to have as many, you don't get to put as many bells and whistles on it, if you will. But it's still a way that you can set aside this money for your child with a disability and not impact his or his or her government benefits. So I'm going to say one more thing about a trust, and then I'm really going to move on. There are two kinds of special needs trusts, and there are legal names for these. And again, I'm not an attorney. I'm going to call it a first party trust or a third party trust, because I think this is the easiest way to understand it. The type of trust that I'm describing to you right now that my husband and I set up for our son is what we call a third party trust. So 1, 2, 3, third party trust. I set it up. It's my money that's funding it. I'm a third party. I therefore get to decide what happens to the money in that trust when Derek passes away. And right now it says that it goes to his sisters. So if Derek passes away and there's still money left in his trust, my daughters will get that remaining balance. The other kind of special needs trust is what I'm going to call a first party trust. So number 1, first party trust. That would be the money of the person with a disability. So if great aunt Millie dies, and even though I've told her she can't leave money to Derek individually, she can leave it to his trust, but not individually. Great aunt Millie dies, leaves Derek $50,000. I can go in and assist Derek in opening what's called a first party trust, meaning it was his money. He set it up. I'm going to help him, but he sets it up. It's his money. The difference is when Derek passes away, the first beneficiary on that first party trust will be the state of Missouri's Medicaid program. Okay. We as parents of kiddos with Down syndrome should work really, really hard not to leave any of our money to our kiddos in a first party trust. We want to leave our money to our kiddos in a third party trust so that when our kiddos pass, that money can stay within our family. Does that make sense? Okay. So now we're going to talk about this ABLE account. This ABLE account is a wonderful thing. It does wonderful things for us as families of people with special needs. It is not, in my opinion, a replacement for a special needs trust, but it does really cool stuff. So I told you that Derek worked for a while, and I charged him rent. And that's one thing that you folks who have kids getting up to the 18-year-old mark, when you apply for SSI, your child will get a larger benefit if you charge him or her rent. Otherwise, SSI thinks you are providing what they call in-kind support. And if you're paying your child's food and housing expenses, they don't need the $780. They might need $200 or $300 to get by every month. Now, you can charge your child rent, and then you can set that money aside in a savings account and name their special needs trust as the beneficiary of that savings account. Or you could invest it, or you could buy a life insurance policy with that money, or you can spend it, because technically it's your money. You're charging them rent. But I highly encourage you to look into that. And I'm always willing to talk to folks when they get to that place. But even with me charging Derek rent, and when he was working, he was making, he worked in a restaurant, he got tips. He was making $500, $600, $700 a month. His Social Security was reduced because of it. But even then, it was hard to keep him under $1,000 a month. I mean, Derek is a kid. It's really funny. When we go out to dinner, Derek wants to pull out his debit card and buy his meal. Not only that, he sometimes wants to buy everybody else's, which I kind of have to, temper. His 27-year-old sister, if she's in the same restaurant with me, even if she's sitting at a different table, she's telling the server to send me her bill. You know what I mean? So, but even with, the things that Derek, because you can only buy so much stuff, right? It was real easy to get up to this $1,000 mark and go over it. And so this ABLE account is huge. So what the ABLE account allows us to do, it allows a person with a disability to have a savings account that is not treated as a countable resource. So when Derek would push up against that $1,000 mark, and I knew we were going to go over it next time we, got the next Social Security payment, I'd write a little check and send it to his ABLE account. Okay. I tell my families, and again, this is my opinion, don't put your own money in it, mom and dad. And here's why. The first beneficiary on Derek's ABLE account when he passes away is Missouri Medicaid. So this works like a first party trust. This money does not stay in the family because all of our kids got a bill. This money isn't going to stay in your family. This money is going to go back to the state. And I'm okay with that, right? Because that's money Derek made and they paid a lot of his expenses and I'm okay with that. But I'm not going to put my money in it. I'm only going to put his money in it. I actually had a conversation with a girlfriend about a week or so ago. Her son also has Down syndrome, and Derek and her son went back to, we were in a First Steps program together. So that tells you how long we've known each other. Her son's 22, Derek's 23. And we were chatting. He's just gotten his first paying job. And she's like, what am I going to do? I'm like, you got to open an ABLE account. And she said, well, why can't I just, have him give me the money? I said, because if you ever get audited, they're not going to like that. So, in order to be on the right side of the law, if you will, nothing's ever an issue. The IRS never has a problem with you unless they audit you and they don't like something you did. Well, SSI is never going to have a problem with anything you do either unless they audit you and they don't like what you did. So I understand where she's coming from. Yeah, she'd rather just take the money that he made and stick it in the savings account that she has set aside that is going to go back into his trust when they're gone. However, that's his money. And once you start commingling his money with this third-party money, you put your whole special needs trust at risk. So what I always tell families is put the money in the ABLE account, spend it first. Right? There are limits on how that money can be spent. Whereas a third-party special needs trust, you can buy tickets to go to Orlando or WWE matches or whatever you want to do. The ABLE account's a little bit more restrictive, but when you can spend the money, spend the money. And I'm never going to let that account get so big that I'm too worried about it going back to the state in the event that Derek should pass. Okay? I will point out this web address here, the www.ablenrc.org. It's a great resource about ABLE accounts. But there are, we do have a Missouri program. It's on the back of the Ohio program. And it's a great program. You just have to understand there is a payback. There are limits on how you can spend it, but this is a great tool for our families to use. And for kiddos with Down syndrome, it's not a problem. The disability has to start, I think it's before the age of 26, but obviously we don't have an issue with that. Okay. So that's my spiel on the ABLE account. We've already talked about guardianship. So I'm going to real quickly, just one more time, the reason this is so important is the only way that we as parents of kids with special needs can leave money behind and not interrupt government benefits is to get that money in that special needs trust. And I have attorneys that I work with in the area that know what they're doing. You need to talk to an attorney who works in this area. I tell people, if you were having a heart attack, would you go to a podiatrist? Right? Not every divorce attorney can even write a will. But not every estate planning attorney understands the nuances that we need within a special needs trust. So you got to talk to an attorney that knows what they're doing. Okay. So we're going to move on and the next two sections are not nearly as long. So we're going to talk about a future care provider. So I have to tell you, do any of you know the movie, The Pacifier with Vin Diesel? Has anybody seen that? Okay. A couple of you have. So the Vin Diesel is he's a military guy, and he comes in to babysit these kids. I'm not going to give you the whole plot, But there's one of the kids is a little boy, and I mean like less than 2. And he had, I think it was called like the Timmy Turtle dance, but he had this dance that you had to do before he'd go to bed at night, or he was not going to bed. Well, Derek was like that when he was little. There were certain lights that had to be on. There were certain lights that had to be off. The door had to be closed, but the closet light had to be on. And then he would put a CD in and he would hit repeat. So the same song played over and over and over. It was an ordeal. Like if you didn't know how to put Derek to bed, nobody in the house was going to sleep. Where do you put all that information for a kid, a kid like ours? Like now Derek would just tell you, but when he was 5 or 6, like there's no way he would have been able to communicate to the level that he needed to get his needs met so that he could go to bed. So it's really good to do all this legal work, but you gotta leave a roadmap. You gotta leave the warm and fuzzy roadmap, right? Don't run out of barbecue sauce. Like that doesn't happen here, right? This is how you put them to bed. Like if fireworks are going off in the neighborhood, this is what you do, right? There are stuff about our kids that nobody knows except the people that live in the house. And what would happen to our kid if nobody in the house was around to talk for him, right? So we have this thing called a letter of intent. It's not a legal document. You don't need anybody's help to do this. You could do it on your own. You don't even need our form. If you want our form, I'll share our form with you. But it's a place for you to put all this day-to-day, warm and fuzzy, don't run out of the barbecue sauce in your world. So that somebody coming in behind you who's trying to step in for this kiddo with special needs who's just lost mom and dad, so that they can make it a little easier, right? So the letter of intent, it also would, for instance, when Derek was really little, I went to this one dentist. I did not like him. I'm not going to bore you with the reasons, but my son was never going to give that man another dime. So I had in my letter of intent that this dentist is off limits. If, I love who he's got, but if something happened to her and you got to go somewhere else, just don't go to this guy, right? And then different therapies maybe that you've tried and worked, or you didn't try and, and you don't want somebody to try behind you, what are their medicines? What are their, those different routines, all of those things about our kids that sometimes they can communicate and sometimes they can't. So that's what this letter of intent is all about. It's to make sure not only do we get the legal work done and we get the financial work done, but we got all the warm and fuzzy stuff too, so that somebody can really step in and care for our kids. And for me, it was always about just keeping the twinkle in Derek's eyes, and because he definitely has a twinkle. So if anybody wants one of those, you can reach out to me and I'll give you that. Okay, so financial considerations. So we do this trust, right? We create this letter of intent. We've left all of the most vital information about our kiddos, and we passed away. What are we going to put in our trust? Okay. Well, the truth of the situation is you can put anything you want in your trust, right? You could put an art collection in the trust or a baseball card collection in the trust. Those are potentially worth a value. However, if that's all you leave in your trust and your kid wants to go to camp, you better not have anything in the trust saying that the baseball cards cannot be sold, because I don't think the baseball cards are going to pay the camp tuition, right? But you can really put any asset in a trust. Now, oftentimes families choose to use life insurance to fund their trust. The reason that we often choose life insurance is because you can pay a small premium today for a large payout tomorrow. Well, hopefully not tomorrow, hopefully 20 years from tomorrow, right? But at some point in the future. Life insurance creates an estate where otherwise there isn't one, right? You can pay a small premium and know there's going to be a death benefit. You're going to die. I mean, that's one of the sure things we got, right? We're going to die and we're going to pay taxes. So that's one of the reasons that we use life insurance. My husband and I elected, and I don't know why this is down here. I think it should have been up a little further. my husband and I'm talking about the screen. My husband and I elected to use what we call a second to die trust. I think these are out of order for me. Basically what a second to die trust is, my husband and I are both insured. So Eric and Valerie are both insured. And when the first one of us passes, the life insurance company is not on the hook for anything. When the second one of us passes, then the life insurance company pays the death benefit. The reason that we elected to do that is because it's less expensive, because we got two bodies on the line, right? It's not very likely. I mean, it could happen, certainly, that my husband and I were killed in this car accident or something. But it's less likely statistically that both of us would die prematurely. So the life insurance company gives us a little bit of a break on the premium because they got two lives on the line instead of one. So that's why we did it. I tell people all the time that if, I fully expect my husband to take care of his son when I'm gone, but if he doesn't, I'll haunt him. So there you go. That's the way it works. So I'm going to go back a couple screens now. Back to this, have you put your dependent with special needs as a beneficiary on anything? This is one thing that when I work with families that I carefully go through. Back in the day, not so much anymore, there used to be, because we're getting better in our industry, honestly, for planning for families who have kids with special needs. There used to be, if you took out your own personal life insurance, there was a box on the application that you could check to make all children of my marriage beneficiaries of a life insurance policy. So what would often happen is dad would take out a policy, name mom as primary, and name all children of this marriage as contingent beneficiaries. Well, you've just named your child with special needs as a beneficiary on your life insurance. And it's probably worth more than $1,000. So you've just created a problem. So one of the things we do is scrub through your complete portfolio of assets. What do you have and where's it going to go when you die? And make sure that you haven't named your child with a disability as a beneficiary on any of your assets. You can name their trust, or you can name your own family's trust, or you might just have a will and that's the way you're going to do it. And you say, I'm, sending it to the estate of Valerie, and my will says when Valerie passes away, 50% of the money goes into a Derek A. Baker special needs trust that will be created at that time. So there's many ways to do it. We just need to make sure that you haven't named your kid with special needs. And the other thing that I would say is you really also need to tell all your family members that they can't name your child either. It took me a couple of years, but my brother did finally set up that trust. Because, if you die, if he was to die, my brother, right, if he and his wife died, right now, his assets would go to my mom because she's still alive. If she wasn't alive, they would, and this is, again, assuming you don't have a will, right? If you have no kids and your parents aren't alive, then it goes to your siblings. Well, if your siblings are dead, it goes to their kids. So it was really important that my brother took care of his own estate planning so that he didn't unknowingly name Derek as a beneficiary of his estate because he has no children of his own, no heirs of his own. Does that make sense? So we have to talk to all of our family members and make sure that either A, they're not just trying to be awesome, because it's awesome they want to leave money to our kids. I love that. It's wonderful. We just got to do it in the right way. Or B, if they don't have their own heirs and somehow, some way, that money could hit our child's pocket, we need to make sure it's done appropriately. Okay? So just a couple more topics. And then we're going to be done. One of the things that you need to consider is if your plan is to have your child with Down syndrome living with you until you pass away, you might want to look into some long-term care for yourself. How are you going to stay in the home when you start having some issues of being an older person and needing some help? So that's something that we talk to families about. I will tell you that I have never come across a program for long-term care for a person with a developmental delay. I don't think you're going to find that. Mass Mutual does have a program to get a modest life insurance policy for individuals with Down syndrome. But that would, so Derek does have life insurance. So if something happened to him, we would be able to take care of his final expenses. But I don't think you're going to get a long-term care policy on a person with a developmental delay. So how do you start? I often say start today because tomorrow's the busiest day of the week, right? Don't put it off. And, again, there are some changes to how we do things when a kid's 18, but that doesn't mean wait till they're 18. Because sometimes there's stuff we have to undo before they're 18. It's important that you work with not only an attorney who understands special needs planning, but also a financial advisor, whether it's me or somebody else like me who knows what they're doing. It's important that you work with people who understand special needs planning. So that's about all I have. I am going to flip to the thank you screen because oftentimes, normally this is in person. And normally I ask for evaluations to get feedback from those of you listening to make sure I was clear and communicated well. But I did get a comment one time that I failed to show all the screens. So what questions do you all have?
Valerie, there's one in the chat that says, if you have beneficiaries listed on all assets, is a will necessary?
I would say yes. And I'm going to try to figure out how to stop my share. Ah, there we go.
There you go. Boo.
I would say yes. And here's why I say yes. Typically, okay, if you're 100% sure beyond a shadow of a doubt that everything you own has a beneficiary, you might be able to get away without having a will. However, most people aren't really 100% sure without a shadow of a doubt that absolutely everything they own has a beneficiary on it. And one of the things that a will typically have is it'll say, you can have that clause in there. If that's all you've got is the will, you can have a clause in there saying, if I pass away and something hits my will and I didn't designate it otherwise, it needs to go here, which would be, in our case, 25% to each girl and 50% to the Derek A. Baker Special Needs Trust. So it's just kind of a fail-safe. You can pull a will off online. I don't recommend that. I think it's more beneficial to work with an attorney and make sure it's been done right. But, wills in and of itself are not incredibly expensive. But yeah, you can put what we call transfer on death or pay on death, POD or TOD designations on like bank accounts, checking, savings, investment accounts. Most IRAs are going to require, or most 401ks, 403bs, any kind of retirement savings plan are going to require that you name a beneficiary. So you can probably get away without a will, but you better be real certain that you don't. And then the other thing is the expense to the attorney, right? My aunt passed away several years ago. She had a trust. She sold the house that was in a trust, bought another condo. It was owned free and clear, never put it in the trust, never put a beneficiary deed on it. And so everything else she owned had beneficiaries on it, except for her property, which was worth, I don't know, 200 grand or something like that. And they had to go through probate for that property. The kids had to be named as the new owners of the property. It cost them like 6% or something like that. So, it's way less expensive to, just do the will or do the trust than it is to have the attorney get their cut via probate. I say this, and I don't mean this out of disrespect, especially if any of you are attorneys. The attorney is going to get paid. The question is, are you going to pay him before you die or after you die? He's going to get paid. They write the rules. They're going to get paid. That's just kind of the way it is. I think maybe another chat popped up.
Yes. The first one says, what happens if someone does die and listed our 7-year-old as a beneficiary? even though we warned them not to.
So that's
So
when
what
we
happened?
would jump in with that first party special needs trust. Okay. So, but you got to be quick. Now, if he's only 7, it's not quite as important from the perspective that he or she is probably not receiving those needs-based government benefits. So nobody's looking to see what kind of assets your 7-year-old has, right? Now, if they do happen to be on Medicaid, even if they're 7, there are kiddos who are younger than 18 that are on Medicaid, then it's real important, just like if they were, 19, 20, whatever. But what you could do is set up that first party special needs trust. And then you spend that money first, right? So if your child is now 25 and he wants to go to Disney World, well, take it out of his first party trust instead of taking it out of his third party trust, right? Because your first party money is going to eventually go back to the state. And your third party trust money that mom and dad have set up with their own money is going to stay in the family. Does that make sense? Or depending upon how much it is, it looks like it's Ann. Depending on how much it is, Ann, you could just open an ABLE account, which would be less expensive than opening up a special needs trust, a first party special needs trust. But you're limited on how much money you can put into an ABLE account on an annual basis. And it's basically right now tied to the gift limit, which is 15 grand a year. So if they left 10 grand, open an ABLE account, you're done, right?
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. What it is my father-in-law's 85 and he's stubborn. So he may or may not decide to believe me when I tell, he's very, well, I don't know how much, but he just needs to leave this money for our precious little Lily. And I just don't know if he's going to believe me when I tell him it's better to do it this other way.
Well, Ann, I am happy to get on the phone or a Zoom call with you and your father-in-law and explain to him why that's important.
Okay,
So
that would be awesome. Okay.
If you think that would help, I'm happy to do it.
Okay. Yeah,
Okay.
that'd be great.
But there are, if it happens now,
right.
he's 85 years old.
Right.
So, I mean,
so anything can happen. That's what I'm worried about. Yeah.
Well, but but your kid's 7, so you got some time to play with.
I know.
You know what I mean? But the two solutions are either, depending upon how much money it is, either a first party special needs trust or an ABLE account.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so is there a restriction on how much money a person or an adult with Down syndrome can have if they are on Social Security, disability, and Medicare? Her father is retired and she was receiving benefits. Here's my answer to you, Karen. The answer is not really, but I would be concerned. And let me just paint a picture for you. So yeah, if you have a child with a disability and they are claiming benefits via their parent's Social Security record, that is not the same as getting SSI. I completely agree. And after you are a person with a disability receiving Social Security disability for, I think it's 2 years, you can apply for Medicare, which is a health insurance program. And that will cover your health insurance, but it's not going to cover job coaching, and it's not going to cover, transportation, and it's not going to cover summer camp or, any of these other things, adult daycare, that we often put in place for our kids. So I would say, if it were me, and again, I can only tell you my opinion, I'm not telling you what's right or wrong. If it were me, I would want my child to be eligible for Medicaid in the event that he or she needs it. Because I don't want the state to come in and say, they got 20 grand or they, have too much income or this or that or the other. So they don't get to go into this residential setting until you spend all their money. So just my opinion, you're right. She's receiving benefits that are not needs-based. However, if in the future you need that sort of help in these other programs, I think it's better to get it set up ahead of time. McKinney, would you agree with that?
Yes, yes.
And you probably see that.
Mm-hmm.
The
Yes.
DSS.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That's one of those things that we get a question a lot about is about taking on, when you get the benefits from your parents' retirement. So
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
yes,
So
ma'am.
that's just like I said, it's just my opinion. I want my kid to be eligible. So, if he needs call a ride to get, to and from WWE match, we got to make sure that's available, right?
That's there, baby.
He's in the kitchen going, yeah, right. Okay. So, how can you save money to set aside for their own funeral arrangements when they can only have an insurance policy for $1,500? Exactly. They don't make this easy for us, do they?
Not at all.
So you can do a prepaid policy, but you have to do a prepaid policy before they're gone. Medicaid will not allow you to pay for the fee. Like if Derek, let's say Derek died. Okay. No offense, Derek. He's free. You can hear me. Derek passes away. He's got money in this ABLE account. I can't take money out of the ABLE account and pay for his burial before I pay back Medicaid. Medicaid is first, absolutely.
First and foremost. Mm-hmm.
You can get a prepaid policy before that, before they're deceased. The other thing is, if it also depends upon who owns the policy. So in the policy that I have for Derek, the life insurance policy I have for Derek, it's a modest policy. It's not a huge death benefit. You're not going to get 100 grand or something like that. It's a permanent policy. I am the owner of the policy and I am the beneficiary of the policy. So it's not his asset. Okay. He can't control it. He can't stop paying it or pay it or surrender it or do anything because it's mine. I'm the owner. I have named his father as the successor owner. And my daughters know that if something happens to either one of us, that one of them needs to get on there as the second successor owner so that it never passes to Derek as an owner. Mm-hmm. So the policy that we have through Mass Mutual that we're able to insure persons with Down syndrome is not a policy where the insured would ever become the owner. But I do know that there are policies out there where the insured could become the owner. So if you're getting a policy on your child, especially a minor child, you need to make sure you understand how that ownership transfers over time, because it can never become the person with a disability. It can never become their policy. They can never become the owner. Can parents contribute any amount to the special needs trust? Is there a yearly amount? No. So that's the cool thing about special needs trusts. There are no limits. There's no 15,000 or whatever. I will tell you that most parents don't fund the special needs trust. So we're talking about the third party trust again, right? Mom and dad set up the trust for their child with a disability. Most parents don't fund that trust while they're living. Derek's trust is broke. On paper, it has $10 in it. Okay. Derek's trust has been named as a beneficiary on a lot of things. Okay. So when my husband and I both pass away, if we blow every other dime we've ever made in our lives, we lose our house, we're renting, everything's done, we still know we got that life insurance policy. So that policy at a minimum will fund Derek's special needs trust. Once that trust is funded, that trust becomes a tax-paying entity. Right now, it's in mine and my husband's social security number, and it's unfunded. But once it becomes funded, we have to get a TIN, a tax identification number. We have to file tax returns every year. And a trust, unlike a person, is taxed at a much higher bracket. You get to the highest tax bracket in a trust, and I'm not an accountant either, but it's like a ridiculous amount of money, like, I don't know, 12 grand or something. Somebody might even know. So most parents don't fund the special needs trust while they're living because they know I'm going to take care of my kid while I'm here. I just want to make sure I have some resource available for maybe my other children or my cousins or my younger sister, whoever's going to step in to take over for you when you're gone, I don't want my girls to be financially burdened by their brother. I want to make sure that I leave money so that Derek can, get the WWE pay-per-views that he can't live without. And so that if they're going on vacation, they can take him with them and not have to foot his bill. And, they can pay for glasses. Medicaid pays for glasses every 3 years. Well, most of our kids wear glasses and most of them get a new prescription every year. So the Medicaid plan is you see for a year and then you can't see for 2, and then you see again for year 3. So, there's dental work that's not covered. So I want a pot of money set aside for Derek so that he is well taken care of when I'm not here to foot the bill. So that's the cool thing about a third-party special needs trust. I can put anything I want in it. I could put millions in it if I so chose. And I think that most parents put in as much as you can. So where am I keeping the money that I've saved? Well, there's a couple of different places. Number one, we put this life insurance policy in place a long time ago. There is some cash value in this life insurance policy because it is a permanent plan of insurance. I looked, when we opened that life insurance policy for Derek, the premium I paid for Derek's life insurance policy was pretty equivalent to the money I put into my daughter's college fund. So they each got an X amount of dollars a month, right? The girls was going into a college fund and Derek's was paying for a life insurance premium that when I'm gone is going to pay into his trust. So some of the money is in that life insurance policy, if you will, but it's really not about the cash value. It's about the death benefit, because cash value is never going to be as big as the death benefit. Okay. That life insurance allows you to pay a little bit today and get a big payoff later. Now, if I put the same amount of money in some sort of a savings account over the same period of time, I feel pretty confident in saying that death benefit's going to be worth way more when I'm gone than whatever that money is going to grow at in the bank. Banks are paying 0, right? Or barely above 0. Could that change? Sure, it could change. When I started in the mortgage business back in 1988, mortgage rates were at 11%, but we have not seen rates like that since the 80s. They have done nothing but fall. You could save money in an investment account, right? Stocks, bonds, mutual funds, those kinds of things. And you have a much greater potential of growing that money if it's in, some sort of an investment vehicle. But it's not guaranteed. And, markets go up and markets go down. I do have that sort of money that will also be paying into Derek's trust at some point in the future. But that life insurance policy, it's kind of like my safety net. Like I said, if I lose everything else, I know that life insurance policy is going to be there. And one thing I didn't mention, I shame on me for not, sometimes families say, I got 2 great daughters, and I do have 2 great daughters. I have 2 great daughters. I'm just going to leave all my money to my daughters, and they're going to take care of Derek. Okay. Now, what I often say here is one of them's going to marry an idiot, but they're both dating really nice young men right now. So right now, maybe they're not. Maybe neither one of them will marry an idiot. But the situation, the reality of the situation is 50% of U.S. marriages end in divorce. Okay. If I leave 50% of my money to Jenna and 50% of my money to Katie and say, take care of your brother, there is a 50% chance that one of them will marry and divorce. So guess what? That means 25% of my money just walked out with the nice young man that I like today, who's an idiot in the future. Right? So, and it's not just divorce. Maybe one of them, is in a horrible car accident and it's proven that they were texting and driving, and so they're sued. Well, that money I just left for them to take care of their brother just went out the window with that lawsuit. So the only way that we as parents of kids with special needs can know beyond a shadow of a doubt that there are resources set aside, left behind for our child with a disability is to put it in a special needs trust. Again, it doesn't have to be something you create today, right? And it could be a pooled trust. It doesn't have to be your own trust. Once you're gone, once Eric and I, so Eric is my husband, Derek is my son. But once Eric and I are gone and that Derek A. Baker Special Needs Trust is funded, it is irrevocable. Nobody can come back and say, oh, they didn't really want that life insurance policy to fund that trust.
Doesn't matter.
They didn't really want 50% of their assets to go in the trust. Nobody can contest it. It's a done deal. And that money can only be used for Derek until he's gone. And then it goes back to my girls or their families. Let's see. Is the investment account in your name and Derek's trust as the beneficiary? Yeah, you would never put the account in the name of your child. So it's going to be, you know, you're going to have either you could name, I could name it in the name of the Derek A. Baker Special Needs Trust. I could do that. But once I do that, I might have to have that tax ID number. So I would say the easier way probably to do that is to have the account set up and then do a transfer on death or a pay on death to the trust or to your family trust. If your family trust is set up and then it says spring out my special needs trust from that. Or if you're going the will route, do it through the will, but keep in mind the attorney's going to get paid more during probate than he would have if you set the trust up today. Yes, contact me. Let me see. Well, I'm going to see if I can share my screen real quick again. Let me put my contact information up for all of you.
Valerie, while you're doing that, this is Sean. I just want to, this is just such fantastic information. Full disclosure to folks, and Valerie did not pay me to be here. I'm actually a financial advisor with a different firm. But I am here because these things aren't easy, right? So I have experience, but I don't know much about ABLE at all. And the stuff tonight I learned was fantastic. I will second Valerie's opinion, not that she needs it, but definitely get a will with your investment accounts and your beneficiaries and all that. I couldn't agree more. I just think that having that step is absolutely spot on. I said, Valerie doesn't need you don't need my kudos, but.
Well, I appreciate that though. Thank you.
Well, and I just wanted to give some folks on the call, maybe just like, this is all, so my Chloe is 3, right? Again, you know, I'm a financial advisor, and it's like, in this stuff, you know, it's not easy. And if you know, even when you study it, it still takes a while to kind of wrap your head around trusts and all these things, and even the details. So I would just say that, you know, when you have resources, I mean, that's why I came on this call, like, you know, I'm willing to learn. So I would encourage everyone, you know, I said the resources that Valerie provided, and reach out to her, because I said she didn't pay me to be here, but again, this is not my area of expertise. So I just wanted to share that, because I think these things can be very daunting. I know it's something I worry about with Chloe more than my other daughter, although now I'm going to worry about my 6-year-old now marrying an idiot. But
Sorry about that.
no, that was really funny. So I will ask maybe one technical question to you, Valerie. Do you think is a UGMA then, is that just redundant? Could you kind of answer my question?
Oh, you don't want to. You don't want to put your kids. You're not. I mean, your other daughter, fine, but
Yeah.
you don't want to have a. And let me tell you what Sean's talking about. He's talking about a custodial account. They're a UGMA, so Uniform Gift to Minors Act, or UTMA, Uniform Transfer to Minors Act. So if before my kids were of age, if I went into the bank and said, I want to open an account, a savings or checking account for my child, they would have put, and Jenna and Katie had one, Jenna Baker, Valerie Baker, custodian for Jenna Baker, and Valerie Baker, custodian for Katie Baker. I did have one for Derek before I moved into financial advising 12 years ago. So he was 10 or 11 when I started doing this, got out of the mortgage business. So that is the, any sorts of those accounts, the UTMA, we call them UTMA or UGMA. Those UTMA and UGMA accounts are the beneficiary's money. So that is your kid's money. That is not your money. You don't want to have one of those accounts for your children. If I have people that come in to work with me, that's one of the things I ask them. Do you have an UTMA or an UGMA? If they do, spend it and do it before.
Yeah.
Do it before they're 18. I had one for Derek. There wasn't much in there, but he had one. The kids had a tomato stand. He got his share. But we before he turned 18, we let him buy a computer with the money.
Because someone else had asked the question too. So basically you look from the investment side of it, you just look at like, look, I've siloed, and you've already answered this and done a great job with it, but you silo off, you invest basically for yourselves, and you know that you're going to fill Derek's bucket and that special needs trust later.
Yeah. Yeah. You don't, I mean, the only reason that I don't have his trust funded today is because I don't want to pay. I'm going to have to pay somebody to file the tax return. Right.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
And B, the tax rate's higher than it would be if I just kept it in my name. So, there's so many ways to slice the pie, and everybody's situation is different. Every family's story is their own story, and each story is a little bit different, and they have their own twists and turns, and not everybody does it the same way. What we try to do, when Andrew and I are working with families, is build your story and make it, make your solutions for your situation. So, and Sean, I'm happy to talk to you more offline about this.
Yeah, this stuff was, and again, like I said, I'm not a paid plant. This was outstanding. I mean, you should see, I took 2 pages of notes. I learned a lot of stuff. And like I said, I shared that because I wanted the other folks on here to feel like, again, these resources and the Down Syndrome Association, like that's why I signed up, right? I can still learn a lot. So if you folks feel like, oh, it's not, this should be easy, like, no, it's tough, right? So I really, really appreciate Valerie, you doing this, and McKinney and that group. This stuff really is just fantastic.
You're very welcome. And I'll tell everybody, I did put my contact information up on the screen. You're welcome to call. Can you see it, or should I make it?
It's really small, but can you make it bigger?
I still can. Is that better?
Yay. Yay.
I should also look and make sure I spelled everything correctly. We offer, Andrew and I are working together. He looks like he was able to get back on the call. He was having an internet problem. He has a brother with special needs. He's a lot younger than me. So we're training him to be the next expert. But we offer complimentary consultations with everybody. So don't think that, you don't want to talk to me because I'm going to cost you money. I'm not going to cost you any money. I would much rather visit with every family and answer your questions and put you on the right path. And some of us might choose to do business together and some of us may not. And that's perfectly fine with me, as long as you're walking away with some education and ammunition to do things maybe a little bit better than you knew yesterday, then, my goals are met.
So let me ask you this, Valerie. So tomorrow morning, I've sat through this all night, all this evening, and I wake up in the morning. What's the first thing that you would say I should do? And I've done that, and I'm the person on the line. Say I'm the one that says I haven't done anything. So what's my first step?
Call me. We're going to schedule a time. I'm doing most everything by Zoom right now. I think, I don't want to bring anything home to somebody here. I don't know if it would be a problem, but I don't want to risk it either. So if you want to meet in person, we'll do that too, but we're doing a lot of Zoom calls. And I think the first call, I get to talk a little bit more in depth about our plan. And then I'll just ask you some questions, what your concerns are, ask you some questions about yourself, and then we figure out from there if we talk again.
Okay. All right.
But I will give anybody, a good hour, 2 hours of my time if I'm helping you.
Well, all right. Well, thank you so much, Valerie. I want to first say thanks so much. You've given so much good information. I learned, although I've sat with you before, I've learned even some more things tonight. So I thank you so very much.